What is going on at the University of Georgia?
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers for free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. If you need one now, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, we're going to get to the college tournament action, but first we got to start with one of the big stories on the football side of things, as news came out yesterday that Georgia wide receiver Nitro Tuggle becoming the latest Bulldog to be arrested on reckless driving charges Thursday morning in Athens. According to the arrest records, Tuggle was taken into custody on charges of reckless driving and speeding at 2 a.m., both at the maximum limit. According to Graham Coffey, our buddy who covers the Bulldogs, Tuggle was released on a $26 bond. This is what I find a little ridiculous. A lot of these stories with the Georgia traffic incidents is like, what are we doing here when the guys are released on a $20 bond? I mean, it is what it is. But nonetheless, both charges misdemeanors in the state. Tuggle's just going into a second year at Georgia, had just 3 catches for 34 yards last year, a couple of those coming against Tennessee. Tuggle originally announced, remember, he was going to enter the transfer portal, but changed his mind a day later. And before coming to Georgia, he was a 4-star recruit out of the state of Indiana. It's considered one of the top prospects in the class of 2024. But of course, this is just a recurring event at University of Georgia, with over 20 players having been arrested for driving-related crimes dating back to January of 2023. I mean, that's just in a little over 2 years' time. And of course, back then, remember, it was offensive lineman Devin Willock and their staffer Chandler LaCroix, who were killed in a crash. But the school announced Thursday afternoon that it wasn't just Tuggle arrested on charges of reckless driving and speeding. There was also, the report came out that offensive lineman Marcus Easley crashed his car into a garage in Athens. Georgia announced that both players have been suspended from all team activities, effective immediately, and they had no further comment at this time. Easley and Tuggle, like we said, just the latest in a long line of these related events. Easley's incident had not been previously reported, but a photograph showed a car run into a garage at, what appears to be a pretty significant speed, with the damage to the car and the garage itself. Yeah, man, I just don't know how this keeps happening. I mean, of course, last September, Bulldogs DB Daniel Harris was arrested for driving 106 miles per hour in a 65 mile per hour zone. He was also charged with not wearing a seatbelt, operating an unregistered vehicle without a license plate, driving without proof of insurance. I mean, it's just like, I don't know how this stuff keeps happening, and it's always going to turn around and fall back on the head coach, Kirby Smart. How does Kirby not kind of get a hold of this stuff? One more on Easley. Again, suspended indefinitely, crashed a car to an apartment complex, and Georgia saying that both guys suspended from all team activities. But, what's the lesson learned here? I mean, even go back to running back Trevor Etienne, missed last season's opener against Clemson for some sort of incident. So, look, it comes back to the head coach, and what does Kirby do to clean this up? I mean, he addressed it last SEC media days. I think the last 2 SEC media days, he's had to answer questions about this. And yet it keeps happening. Now, look, I've heard from people that live in Athens that the police there are pretty strict on things. Like, they're not willing to, in other towns, cops might let a football player slide, the old school, I'll call coach, or like, coach, no, you got pulled over, I'll let you go, whatever sort of thing. But I also think look, speeding is one thing, but it's a misdemeanor. It's a ticket. There must be some kind of like threshold where if you're speeding over a certain level that you're going to jail, because it seems like a little bit of a waste of everybody's time to keep bringing guys in for booking and booking them into the jail and then paying a $26 bond to bond out. Seems a little ridiculous. But again, Kirby's going to have to address this stuff again. And I don't know, like, remember last year, there were guys who started getting suspended. Like, I think you almost have to start resorting to guys half a year suspension, right? Like, you're going to have to like turn up the punishment for some kind of the next traffic related incident, because it just seems like this isn't like it's all the same guys on the same team. This is different generations now of players on the Georgia Bulldogs roster, right? I mean, like, it's not all like guys that were just on one team together. This is it's multiple years of different guys from different recruiting classes and different groups going to be Georgia Bulldogs who keep getting busted and arrested for reckless driving, speeding, whatever. Now, one other note here, Georgia, they got some questions going into next season, and Heather Dinich up at ESPN, she put together an article talking about the biggest obstacles facing every playoff contender, and she was asked what the biggest obstacle for Georgia is. Now, again, the joke here could be, reckless driving by players, but nonetheless, she chose the offense. And here's what Heather Dinich wrote. She said, offensive improvement. One specific area would be easier to zero in on this spring, but the reality is Georgia ranked number 102 in rushing yards per game, number 132 with drops by receivers, and number 117 with a 6.9% drop percentage. Bulldogs ranked number 126 with 24 fumbles last year. All of those things halted promising drives and must be corrected with 4 new starters on the offensive line and a new starter at quarterback in Gunnar Stockton. And transfer receivers who need to help drastically cut down on those number of drop balls. The additions of Zachariah Branch from USC and Noah Thomas from A&M should give that group an immediate boost. But this spring will start the acclimation and learning process. Georgia's offense wasn't bad last year, but it must improve. Of course, the defensive side of the ball always looks pretty good under Kirby Smart. But again, that's Heather Dinich on the biggest obstacles facing Georgia this offseason. But look, man, clean it up, right? I mean, this is like the offseason. We'll always say, like, this time of year, when you're into March and April and then into May, like the biggest thing you want is you want your team to stay out of the headlines. Because if you're making headlines in March, April, May, it's because something bad happened, right? Something off the field, something with an arrest or whatever. So again, this won't be the last. Like, there will be another story of a Georgia player that gets arrested for something with a car. We joked before, like, can they not get like Uber and services in Athens? Just like, hey, can we get a private car service for every player that just drives them around? And some of this roots back to drag racing and that sort of stuff too. Like, again, that kind of stuff just feels like, if you're the coach and you keep letting it happen, why do you keep letting this happen? Like, at a certain point, these aren't all the 18-year-olds doing it. Some of these are upperclassmen and guys who've been around a little while. Like, how does stuff like this keep happening? Be a little bit mature, take some responsibility for yourself. And I don't know. It's gotta stop at Georgia. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we will get into recapping day 1 of the tournament action. That's coming your way in just a sec. Hey, but first, we are all about the stats because numbers don't lie. When it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It is powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories, whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Also, daylight savings time snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in around a golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy is going to give you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. And again, staying up late watching all that tournament action, 5-Hour Energy is going to help keep you up the next day. Whether you're at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and will keep you refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. If you need one now, grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to every dayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. All right, we need to get into recapping some of the tournament action that has been happening. And, of course, the Auburn Tigers, they took care of business. They beat Alabama State in their first round of the tournament game yesterday. Was never in doubt. Auburn closed as a 31.5-point favorite in the matchup, and it was close in the first half, but they end up pulling away. 23 points from Miles Kelly, and Auburn rolled to an 83-63 win over Alabama State. And, there were some people saying, oh, can the 16 upset, one seed? No, Auburn settled down and took care of business. They ended the game shooting 45% from the field, 31% from three. They made 11 threes. Kelly had 7 of them. The rest of the team shot 4 for 20 from behind the arc, so they got to clean that up. Pettiford had 16 points to go with 5 assists, and Auburn is moving on. Tigers will face 9-seed Creighton in the second round on Saturday. Also, Arkansas, they knocked off Kansas to advance to the second round. The 10-seeded Razorbacks beating the 7-seed Kansas in a thriller, 79-72. John Calipari versus Bill Self. And in the second half, Arkansas did what they needed to do. Their offense stalled for a lengthy stretch. They had a 55-44 lead with 17 minutes to go, but it was back to a one-point game with 5:40 to go. But Jayhawks would go cold. Razorbacks were able to get on a run, and Arkansas closed it out on a 15-5 run. Jonas Adu, the team's leading scorer with 22 points on 10 of 19 shooting. John L. Davis led the Hogs in the second half with 10 points, finished with 18 for the game. DJ Wagner was good. Javon Brazil was good. Razorbacks took 7 more field goal attempts than Kansas, and they out-rebounded them 38-34. Big win. Big win for John Calipari and company, and now we will get that matchup between Cal and Rick Pitino, St. John's, in the second round. And it's just good for Arkansas fans, right? I mean, like, you end up moving on from Musselman, you bring in Calipari, everybody gets all excited. He starts bringing some big-time recruits, some guys through the transfer portal, and then you start off so rough. You start off 0-5 in conference play, and it looks like the season is dead. You rebound, you go 9-6 down the stretch of the season. You punch your ticket to the tournament when some people were saying maybe you were still on the bubble. And then you not only make the tournament, but you pull off an upset in round one. I want to say Arkansas was around a 4.5-point underdog in this one. So good on Calipari. We talked about it. He hadn't had much tournament success the last 5 years at Kentucky. Just one tournament win. Well, he ties that in his first season at Arkansas. Now, this next round is going to be tough. St. John's is really good. But a good win for Calipari and a good win for Arkansas. Congrats to them. They are moving on. How about some of the other teams in hoops action? Tennessee gets 29 points from Chaz Lanier on Thursday. for a 77-62 win over the 15th seed Wofford. Lanier, of course, transferred in from North Florida. It's been great all season long, and he was at an all-time level. Turned it up a notch. 29 points were one off a season high and made 6 threes, tied a program record for three-pointers in an NCAA tournament game for the Vols. And they led by as many as 18 points in the second half. Only 6 turnovers, limited Wofford to just 9 free throw attempts. Zakai Ziegler, he had 12 points to go along with 12 assists and 2 steals. 4 different Tennessee players recorded multiple steals. 7 different Vols scored at least 5 points. Stay a big win for Tennessee. And so they will be facing 7th seed UCLA on Saturday in the next round. Texas A&M, they were the 4 seed and talked about it all last week, man, that Yale was going to be a tough, formidable opponent. But Texas A&M did what they needed to do. Led by season high 25 points, 10 rebounds from Pharrell Payne. Aggies beat the Bulldogs 80-71 to advance to the second round. Payne was a bully throughout the evening. Scored 6 straight points through midway through the first half to help A&M take a 10-point lead. Pushed it to 15 with 5:43 to play. And Aggies shot poorly, 6 of 25 from 3, just 24%. Outscored Yale 48-32 in the paint and out-rebounded them 37-29. I did say that, if A&M was going to win, if they were going to advance, that they were going to have to, out-rebound Yale. And that was the key because, you knew they weren't going to outshoot them. Shooting percentages, Yale was a much better shooting team than Texas A&M, but bullied them down to the paint, got the rebounds, did what they needed to do. So Texas A&M will face Michigan, the 5 seed, coming up on Saturday. And then, look, it wasn't all good. Mizzou, they shot 33% from the field, 25% from 3, had more turnovers than made baskets, and the 6-seeded Tigers lost to 11-seed Drake, 67-57. So Mizzou's run ends. It was a great season for Mizzou, but you just felt like, and I felt like when I kept looking at Drake's resume and everything, kept saying, I don't feel like Mizzou's going to win this game. 4 different Mizzou players were responsible for 3 or more turnovers. Just didn't take care of the ball. 17 giveaways, 15 made baskets. That ain't going to get it done. So Mizzou, their season comes to an end, but all the other teams we talked about are moving on. How about Texas? We didn't talk about them. They lost the other night in the first 4 play-in game. They fell to Xavier 86-80 Wednesday night. And there's some conversation about Rodney Terry and his future. We've been talking about that on prior shows. Well, there's a real momentum building for Texas to move on. And some people predicting an announcement will come very soon. According to a report from Jeff Goodman, the Longhorns planning to move on for Rodney Terry after second full season in Austin. It's been there 2.5 years. Of course, took over for Chris Beard midway through the 21-22 season, led them to the Elite Eight. But a lot of teams wondering, or a lot of folks wondering, who will be that next person. Well, some rumblings out there that perhaps, they could look to the NBA ranks at a Quinn Snyder, who, according to some reports, already has a house in Austin and, would make a lot of sense. But the latest rumblings are maybe the guy who beat them, Sean Miller at Xavier, could be the guy to replace Rodney Terry at Texas. So certainly a story we're going to keep an eye on and continue to watch. But, we already talked about the SEC having some of the best coaches. And it's no offense to Rodney Terry. He's been a heck of a nice guy by all accounts and tried his damnedest there. But can you imagine adding a Sean Miller to this conference? A guy with his resume and accolades to go with a Bruce Pearl, a Nate Oates, a Todd Golden. I mean, just run down the list. The SEC already has one of the best collections of head coaches in college basketball. And you're going to add Sean Miller to that mix? All right, one more note here before we move on. Alabama, they're in action today, depending on when you guys are listening to this. Nate Oates met with reporters yesterday ahead of their game with 15-seed Robert Morris and updated the status for Grant Nelson. course, he's their stretch 5 who helps fuel their offense. He suffered an injury in Alabama's semifinal game against Florida. Well, according to Nate Oates, Nelson is still day-to-day, still doing workouts, did not participate in Thursday morning's practice. So, yeah, our trainers are saying he's day-to-day. Just yesterday, he started doing basketball, still workouts. He did not go live play and practice today, but he wants to play. He's a competitor. It'll end up being a game time decision. So that will be one to track there. So here's who we got going today in the SEC for those who are tuning in. You've got right out of the gates, we got Baylor, Mississippi State. Again, I just think, my opinion, the way Mississippi State's played the last month, Mississippi State's got 2 wins in the last month, and they were both against LSU, one of the worst teams in the SEC. I'm taking Baylor in that one. I think Alabama takes care of business against Robert Morris. And then this afternoon, the red-hot UNC Tar Heels playing Ole Miss. UNC still a favorite, according to the point spread over at FanDuel. So, I don't like Ole Miss's chances, but look, we'll be rooting for Ole Miss. Hope they can pull it off. Florida should take care of business against Norfolk State. And then we will get Kentucky versus Troy this evening. I think Kentucky should take care of business against Troy. And then this evening, I just like the reigning national champs UConn over Oklahoma. We'll see if the Sooners can pull that one out. But that is all the action tonight. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, that the band Nickelback came out with released their bracket for some reason, and they were high on the SEC. They have Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama all making runs in the Final Four. They have Florida advancing to the semis to face off against Michigan State. The Spartans advanced after knocking off Auburn in their bracket. But in the finals, they have the Florida Gators playing the the Houston Cougars beating Duke. They have Florida cutting down the nets. So Nickelback picking the Florida Gators. We'll see if that happens. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got some football nuggets here before we call it a show, so let's dive into that. Over at Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz and company making a bold claim on Thursday. He was on the Paul Feinbaum show talking about his 2025 Missouri team. Of course, they will have to replace Luther Burden at wide receiver. Of course, Brady Cook at quarterback. A lot of changes, and Eli Drinkwitz assessing his team so far this offseason. And he said, look, Paul, very impressed with the way that we attacked the spring. I'm incredibly excited about the talent we've acquired on this football team. I'm bullish on our ability defensively. I think we're going to have one of the best defenses that we've had since I've been here. I think we've got pros at every position on our defense. I think we're as deep as we've ever been defensively. Pretty bold claim there from Eli Drinkwitz, because they've had some good defenses, but he is saying that this is going to be the best one. According to Bill Connolly, Mizzou returned 76% of their defensive production from last season. That's 5th best in the FBS. And you look around the pieces, I like, Zion Young, Chris McClellan, Sterling Webb, all on that defensive line. Linebackers, they bring in Josiah Trotter, Damon Wilson to go with Tristan Newsom. Of course, the secondary is always going to be good. They had Jalen Catalon, journeyman who played at Arkansas several years back, played at Texas. Marvin Burks at safety, Drayden Norwood at DB. Again, some really good pieces on that defense, but Tigers looking for who's going to be that next elite pass rusher. Going to look for one of those guys on the D-line to step up and emerge this spring. How about over at LSU? John Emery of course, had a couple of seasons at LSU the last 2 years, tore his ACL both seasons, both injuries happening early in the year. He's only had 33 carries over his last 2 years of college ball. Well, despite all that, John Emery making an announcement on Instagram this week that he will be indeed returning for his 7th season of college football. Now, some people were saying, does that mean LSU? Does he hit the transfer portal, head elsewhere? We'll have to keep an eye out for that. But 7th season for John Emery. Remember, John Emery was on the national championship team with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and those guys back in 19. So pretty wild that he will get a 7th season of college football. But injuries keep happening, and it sucks. And at least NCAA being a little bit fair, saying, look, give this kid another chance to chase his dream. Another LSU tidbit, Tristan Keys, one of the top wide receiver recruits in the class of 2026, verbally committing to LSU on Wednesday. He's out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 6'2", 180 pounds, listed as class of 2026's number 1 player of the state of Mississippi, and big-time wide receiver. LSU now 7 commits for their 2026 class, which ranks number 5 nationally on the composite. Over to Alabama, they had their pro day on Wednesday afternoon, and a lot of their young talent showcasing what they could do at the next level. And according to Alabama, Jalen Milroe putting on a show in the 40-yard dash, clocking at a 4.37 40-yard dash. Milroe did not run the 40 at the NFL Combine a couple weeks ago. Only 3 quarterbacks did. Brady Cook was actually the fastest of the bunch, ran a 4.59, but 4.37 for Milroe is pretty damn solid. And, the big question on him is continuing to improve as a passer and developing his skills that way. But there's no doubting his athleticism and his ability to throw the football. And, of course, Alabama going into a big year 2 under Kalen DeBoer, where they must improve, particularly at that quarterback spot. And ESPN, Chris Lowe, doing an article on their way too early top 25 teams and naming players from each team that could break out this year. And Chris Lowe predicting quarterback Ty Simpson will win the quarterback battle. Here's what Chris Lowe writes. He said, there will be some intrigue this spring surrounding the quarterback battle at Alabama, especially with Ryan Grubb coming in as OC. Crimson Tide brought in 5-star freshman quarterback Keelan Russell and talented Austin Mack, followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama from Washington last year. But it's Ty Simpson's time now. After backing up Milroe the past 2 years, and the Alabama staff really liked the way Simpson competed last preseason and spring. He wasn't too far behind Milroe then. And while not as dynamic an athlete as Milroe, Simpson is still plenty athletic and more consistent throwing the ball. This is Simpson's 4th year on campus. And though he hasn't played much, he is a good fit for what Grubb and DeBoer want to do offensively. Alabama will open the season with Florida State on Saturday, August 30th. Yeah. Look, to me, that still is the biggest storyline of the spring, of course, across college football, or across the SEC at least. Who's going to win that Alabama job? Because everybody looks at the Alabama roster and says they got talent everywhere. This is a team that can bounce back. This is a team that can, get to 10-2 or better and compete, win the SEC, and certainly make a playoff game this year. But they got to get the quarterback thing figured out. And, even if it's a harken back to an old, can Ty Simpson just be a game manager, right? Can he just not turn the football over, get the ball into Ryan Williams' hands and the playmakers, have a dominant run game, and be a, John Parker Wilson-esque type quarterback, Greg McElroy, I don't know, whoever you want to say. Or, could he be the Mac Jones, guy who sat around and waited his time and blew up his last year? Now, Mac Jones had some big-time wide receivers. I think Jeremy Bernard's pretty good. Ryan Williams, obviously, is a stud, but that's the biggest question for me with Alabama is they can figure out that quarterback spot. They're going to be right back into the thick of things, and the DeBoer hire will start to look a lot better. But if they struggle to find consistency, and they struggle with quarterback play, could be another 3-loss, 4-loss season, and could spell trouble for Kalen DeBoer in just 2 years in Tuscaloosa. So certainly big storyline we'll be tracking. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, you could check out our friends Isaac Shade and Andy Patton over at Locked On College Basketball. March is here, so you want to be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.